Hi, I'm Dana Asaf from Science Behind the Fan in Griffith Uni. Today I'm going to explain to you the science behind the fan, the floating egg experiment. So here is what you will need. You will need some table salt, you will need a container with tap water, and you will need an egg. If you put the egg inside like that, it will just sink. But you want the egg to float, so what you do is we add a few tablespoons of salt. It will take some time for it to dissolve, so please bear with me. We need to add about 4 or 5 tablespoons of table salt to this container. And let's see. So now that we added salt, we will just drop the egg in and the egg float. So in order to make the egg float, we basically added salt. So what actually happened here? When we dropped the egg into the fresh water, the egg was heavier or denser than the water, so it straight away sank. However, when we changed the freshwater solution into saltwater solution by adding salt, the egg floated because the water became denser than the egg. And what is actually density? It's the measure of how much mass in volume. So the units that we use differ. So if we use units for solids, so we would have so we might have for solids and for liquids. We would use SI units for solids, so it would be, let's say, a kilogram per cubic meter, or a gram per cubic centimeter. And if we measure the density of liquids, we measure that as a gram per milliliter. And please bear in mind that 1 milliliter equals 1 cubic centimeter. How can density be changed? Density can be changed by changing the temperature, changing the pressure. That usually works well with gases. It can be changed by compressing or by adding a substance to the liquid, like we did with the salt water. As for compressing, a very good example is taking sand, pouring it very carefully into a container. It would have a certain density which is much lower than if we were to compress the same sand in the same container. What happened when we compressed? We actually lowered, we had the same amount of sand in a smaller volume. So we changed the volume, we lowered it, hence the density became higher. Going back to our salt water solution and the floating egg, the egg floats because it is less denser than the salt water and because it weighs less than the buoyant force which is acting upon her. What is the buoyant force? The buoyant force is the upward force a liquid exerts on an object, in our case on the egg. It is also, the buoyant force is also the weight of the displaced liquid. What happened here in the salt water, in the freshwater solution, actually the object here, our egg, was denser than the water, and its weight was much greater than the buoyant force acting on it. Recognizing that salt water changed its density by adding salt into it helps us discuss the buoyant force acting on the egg. In the freshwater solution, the buoyant force acting on the egg is negative. In the saltwater solution, the buoyant force acting on the egg is positive, providing that there is enough salt in the water to make it denser than the object. An object like an egg would float. When we provide this information, we take into consideration two things. One is that the density of the liquid is uniform, and B, that there is no movement of the object. I hope you enjoyed my simple yet important experiment.